Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. My goal here is to help us all connect, inspire, and create. We're here live on Zoom every Wednesday night with a new topic and a guest speaker that shares their photography expertise with us. If you get a chance, check out the list of upcoming presentations at lindanickell.com. Under Happiness Hour, you'll find our previous sessions linked to the YouTube channel. So please subscribe, like, and share with some of your photography friends that might enjoy our content. And better yet, invite them to join us live. I've got some great topics and cues, such as In a Flash, lightning photography, and dark sky time lapse with Rob Huvis, who will be here next week. And Valerie Hoffman will be back on November 18th for a session called Finding Beauty in the Broken. Our guest tonight is Crass, a landscape and travel filmmaker. Based in Miami, Chris is a full-time professional photographer that specializes in lifestyle, branding, and video production. In tonight's session, a bird's eye view, drone photography. Chris shares some compositional techniques to improve your aerial photography, and he'll show you some of his amazing images. And with a few of his tips, you will be able to get the most out of your time in the air. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Chris. As you know, I found you on Instagram. I found you on Instagram, and I haven't been following you for very long. But one of the first things I saw on your page that caught my eye was your travel vlog on the Northwest. Yeah. And then I found my way to your website, where I spent a lot of time, and I'm not exaggerating. I spent a lot of time. I'm a traveler, so I saw that you had a whole bunch of travel guides. And
the travel guide videos.
Yeah, I mean, I found them interesting and helpful. And because I can't travel right now, most of us can't. It's kind of it's a supplement to beating down that craving. So when I reached out to you to do a presentation, I have expected you to decline, but I'm thrilled to have you join us tonight. And I'm particularly excited that you chose to talk about drone photography, because what I typically do is when I invite people, I let them choose the topic. And sometimes we'll talk about it and bat it around and tweak it. But when you said you could do it on drone photography, I was not going to talk you out of it. So it's one of these things that I'm hoping to get better at. And so hopefully I'm going to let you get started. And if I missed anything in your intro, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I'm going to turn it over to you now.
All right. So as Linda mentioned, I do photography and video production full-time as a job. Most of the stuff I do is real estate, boats, small business videos, lifestyle branding kind of things. But what I do in my spare time is travel, landscape, documentary, films, and basically taking all the equipment that I use for work and doing more fun things with them. And which is why all my website and Instagram and all my branding is around travel and all that, because it's kind of what I want to do more of rather than put out the work that I actually do. So I had a few topics that I was thinking about talking about, and just due to the technicalities, because I was thinking about doing some time lapse or some other topics. The drone photography would have been the easiest because we could show the photos and all that through Zoom. So I've been flying drones since 2014, probably. My first drone was the Phantom 2. Back then, we had a 12-minute flight time. You had to put everything together separately, the camera, the gimbal, the transmitter, your receiver, kind of how to put everything together. And then with the Phantom 3, everything became integrated, and you can take photos and videos and switch between the modes. And that was just the beginning of like unleashing the creativity of everything. From there, I have the Phantom 4. I've had a whole bunch of Mavics, just almost every model of DJI drone except for the Inspire, the super high end. I just really couldn't justify to myself buying something like that. I mean, that's for doing commercials and stuff like that. And then recently getting into the FPV drones right here, which I'm not going to talk about because I'm just a beginner at it, but they are extremely awesome, and maybe something for the future. Okay. So to begin, I'm just going to go over some photos that I selected just from over the years that I've shot, just to show you some examples of what you can do with drones and then I'll get into different techniques and choosing a drone, your different options, at least at the moment, because they're always coming out with new models and prices are changing. So this will be relevant for maybe a year or so. But we'll just get started. Let me share the screen here. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through some photos, just some random selections. I think I set them up as cityscapes first, and some landscapes, and then some extra stuff at the end. So this is just the Miami skyline during sunset. Pretty awesome skyline we have here. That's constantly they're just constantly putting buildings up. This is the tallest one right now, but I'm gonna be building something over here pretty soon, and so this is just, a perspective that you would never be able to get unless you were flying a small plane or a helicopter, which are two very expensive options. Here we have a twilight of, this is in Milwaukee, I believe. I forgot what this building is called, but it's this interesting building where, sorry, let me use the mouse here, where these wings open up, and it's a pretty cool structure if you're into architecture photography. Another thing that's popular with drones are these top-down shots. It's more of like a minimalist, abstract kind of genre photography. This is the Buckingham Fountain in Chicago. Just a top-down shot in the morning at sunrise. This is a figure at the Mormon Temple in Las Vegas. You can see the Las Vegas Strip back here. And this is kind of highly edited, but I don't know. It's a cool little contrast, the blue and the yellow here. This is a neighborhood in Reykjavik, Iceland during sunset. They have these colorful houses. You got the kind of like blue tones here and orange tones here, kind of a nice color contrast. This is sunset here in Miami. This is the American Airlines Arena. Just, you can see the different kind of perspectives you can get, like this plane on top. You would see that maybe if you're on an actual plane flying out of Miami, but otherwise you would never be able to see that. And then it kind of interesting composition here with the buildings, and then this sun glare on the arena. These are some sailboats here in this marina over here. This is the Miami skyline in the back. And you'll notice that some of these photos are very interestingly edited. It was just like a side project that I started during COVID. I started like a separate Instagram, and I just made all these photos that were sort of Miami pastel colors. So everything's kind of like teal and pink. This last photo is kind of the same kind of thing. It was just a side project I started. If you're wondering why the colors are so weird, this also kind of the same thing. I tweaked the colors a lot, but this is also Miami at night. Well, a little bit past sunset, because legally you can't fly at night. You're allowed to fly 30 minutes past sunset. You see a lot of nighttime photos, but you're technically not allowed to do that. Not saying that you'll get caught, but if you have a popular Instagram account and you're posting a lot of nighttime drone photos, at some point it'll catch up to you. This is Ocean Drive, and this is also those interesting colors I was talking about. These are famous Art Deco hotels. Cruise ships over here. This is the Hard Rock Hotel guitar. The perspective that you would never be able to get if you didn't have a drone. And then what you notice when you get your drone in the air, you'll notice just the architecture and the layout of things from an aerial perspective that you won't notice from the ground, like the way these are the Venetian islands in Miami and how they line up. And then you have, different kind of composition options here with this leading line in the center and the islands here. This is like a semi top-down shot, also with that interesting color grade of the Biltmore Hotel. It's in Coral Gables in Miami. And this is a cruise ship, very teal and pink, you'll notice here. Okay, now we're getting into the landscape stuff. So as far as landscapes, well, actually, I'm not going to talk about that yet so much. Let's just go over these photos first. So this is a bridge in the Lofoten Islands in Norway. It's kind of like your leading line here. And, this is actually a shot that I copied from my photographer, Mads Peter Iverson. Very classic shot. And then what drones will allow you to do is to take the most epic selfies ever if you want photos of yourself at these locations that are better than just somebody grabbing your iPhone and taking a photo of you standing at the edge of this cliff. This is a hike in Lofoten. It's called Ryton. And I'm here at the edge of the cliff. And the drones these days, they have not only will they hold a position, but they have auto mode. So you can take, I basically put it into time lapse mode for I think every 5 seconds, positioned it behind me, and then just looked off into the distance and just took epic selfies. These are other epic selfies I took in Lofoten. This is the Rheinebringen hike, very difficult hike. Well, difficult slash just steep, but you can see just how having yourself as a focal point and the epic landscapes, these shots that you would never be able to get otherwise. This is after I did a crazy hike here doing the Rocky two hands up. This is don't remember what the name of this hike was. I think it was more to the south of the Lofoten Islands. And this was also in the same hike, but a little bit further up, but just these crazy landscapes that you that just with the drone, the aerial perspective, they look really amazing. This is the Studlagill Canyon in Iceland, these iconic basalt cliffs. And this is actually the cover image from my drone presentation. I guess it'll go on the YouTube. This is in the Pacific Northwest, the Oregon coast. Again, you know, selfie, small and you know, putting yourself in the photo also helps with perspective, because otherwise, if this person, if I wasn't here, it would be a cool enough landscape, but it adds the perspective and your focal point to your photo. I'm going to go through these a little faster so I can get to the presentation. Same place. Interesting top downs. This is right out of Portland. It's a famous plane. You might have seen it on Instagram. This is the, forgot the name. There's so many waterfalls in the Pacific Northwest. I can't remember all the names, but this is a well-known one. Seljalands Foss in Iceland. At sunrise, I had to edit out all the people because this is a very popular waterfall. Abstract top downs. This is in Costa Rica. This is the famous bridge in Big Sur, Bixby Bridge, I believe. There's no access to the beach down here. So unless you were on a boat, this is not a perspective you would be able to get. Hiverfjall in Iceland. Amazing crater. I mean, it's hard to tell the perspective and the scale in this because I'm like a tiny dot somewhere here. You can see this is like the car in a little shack, but it's a really cool location. This is sort of a long exposure drone shot. You can also add ND filters to your drone, and if it's not windy, they're stable enough that they'll hold their position. I wouldn't push it past a second and a half, but you can do somewhat long exposures with the drones these days because they're really stable. This is the same ship just facing towards the sunset. This is also Costa Rica, epic locations. And then you'll see like just these shorelines and just landscapes just will look different from an aerial perspective. And this is what drones will allow you to do. I'm going to skip through these. Action sports look great with drone photography. These are some surfers in Dominican Republic. And these are some of the boats that I shoot. This is in the Bahamas. And, you know, epic boats, getting details, top-down shots. I do the same kind of things with the boats, you know, just different angles. And these kind of shots would traditionally be done with a helicopter, which can't always get as low as a drone. I have seen some crazy helicopter pilots shoot boats, so some of them do get these low angles. But yeah, helicopter pilots are not big fans of drones because, well, they claim they're dangerous and because they're taking their jobs, I guess. Some more boat stuff, but I think you get the idea of what we can accomplish with the drone. Linda, should I go straight into the presentation or is there any questions?
There are a lot of questions.
Uh-oh.
So let me, and I knew that you would generate them. So let me ask you some that we can just kind of get out of the way. And then
Okay.
I'll come back to some of the ones that, because I'm going to try to get everybody's questions in. Let's start with when you were taking the city shots. So there's a question, aren't there restrictions against flying around downtown areas like the shots that you had in there?
So when you're getting your drone and you're traveling with your drone, the first thing you should do is kind of see what are the rules and regulations. You know, it could be as simple as a quick Google search. Sometimes you have to search pretty deeply, and because you can get away with a lot of this stuff, but you don't want to, you know, just because incentivize other people to bring their drones. And even if you go to a location, like I've been to New York, and New York is like the most non-drone area ever, but you'll see tourists flying their drones and you think like, oh, well, he's getting the shot, I want to get the shot too. You don't want to just kind of add to that. But certain cities, different cities have different rules. I try to do all the research I can. Like I was going to mention later, the place that you would most want to fly a drone and get these epic shots are national parks, but those are completely off limits. There's a whole permitting system to get permission to fly, but then you have to plan for, you have to give them a specific date, you have to give them a reason. It really only works if you're, you know, for a company doing, or a film studio is shooting a movie or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of rules and regulations with drones, and definitely research that beforehand.
Okay. So I believe that there was a skyline shot that was kind of close to the Miami airport. So the question is, are you certified? Are you a certified drone flyer? And then, you know, does that allow you to fly near airports?
It wasn't near the airport. The airport has a 5 mile no-fly zone, which the DJI drones these days, they have geofencing built in, which means they won't even take off next to the airport. So you'll know when you're in the no-fly zone because it'll say can't take off. And then if you're a little bit out, there's different kinds of airspaces. There's Class B, Class C, and all this stuff that you have to learn if you want to be a commercial drone pilot, which is a whole different thing. You have to get a Part 107 exemption. But there are ways of unlocking the no-fly zone if you're a little further away, and you just have to enter some information and of course fly safely. Don't go higher. You're limited at 400 feet regardless. So yeah, so airports are no goes.
Okay. So because you were showing a couple of the selfies, I want to ask you, uh, Kathy is asking, do you put down your drone controller or put it in a certain mode for the selfie? How does it hover is what her question is.
Well, if it's not windy, it'll hold its position. So yeah, I put the controller down, like kind of out of the shot or kind of like near my feet, and I have it on time lapse mode. And you know, I'll have it already composed beforehand, and I'll just kind of stand there or raise my hands up, and it'll take the shot. And then I'll wait a few seconds where I know it's taken a few, and then I'll kind of look at the controller, see what I got, maybe redo it, maybe keep it.
Okay. Two more questions and we'll get into your presentation. But when you were talking about nighttime restrictions, is that something, or do you know, does that apply to, is that a general restriction or is that just specific to the area that you're in?
It's a general restriction. And what's interesting is if you go into the FAA website, it says if you are a Part 107 licensed operator, you cannot fly at night or past 30 minutes past sunset. But then it gives a list of rules for hobbyists, and it doesn't specify that at night, but it is a general understanding that even for hobbyists, non-commercial use, you're not allowed to fly at night. Though you'll see a lot of these photos on Instagram.
Yeah. One last question, and I'll get you right into your presentation. David wants to know, is the camera set to auto, or do you have a remote control of camera settings? You know, how about your focus? Is it set to infinity? How are you doing that?
So they, well, as far as settings, different drones will allow you to change aperture, shutter speed. The cheaper drones will only allow you to change the shutter speed and ISO. The more higher end, you could change the aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. The focus, it's kind of like you point on the screen and it'll set the focus. Before the Phantom, well, the 3 and all the drones that came before it, the DJI Phantom 3, it was just preset focus with nothing that you could adjust. And then once they released the Mavic and all the ones after that, you would have to set the focus. And actually, when I first bought the Mavic, the first few shoots that I did, like for work, I didn't realize that you had to set it. And I just had a whole bunch of out of focus shots, and I eventually learned it's pretty easy. You just press on your phone and it'll set the focus to that point. So whether it's something close or far away, you just press and it'll beep.
Okay, so I know the answer to this, but you're using your phone or an iPad, something.
Yeah. I used to use iPad Mini, but one thing that DJI will do is release many updates for their app, and depending what model iPad or phone you have, it will quickly become obsolete, and you'll have to buy the newest one. And so my iPad Mini, it was a nice big screen, but it was starting to lag too much when I was flying, and when I was shooting the boats and stuff. It's kind of dangerous to have a lag between the screen and the drone. And so I started using my iPhone 7, even though it was a smaller screen, but it had a better CPU. And then now I'm using an iPhone 10. I'm not so sure about the Android side of things. The best way is just go on to the DJI website and see what the specs of the tablets or phones that they recommend. But usually the most up to date phone or tablet that you can get, is what you should stick with.
Okay.
All right, so drone photography, Chris Crass, Boss Talk Pro. Let's get into it. So I'm going to start off with how do you go about choosing your drone. It's going to depend on your budget, your skill level, what you will be shooting, and whether it's a hobby or commercial use. And that's where I covered the whole Part 107 thing. So as far as entry level drones, this is current as of now. I think they're about to release a new Mavic Pro line. So I mean, I don't think they've released the specs or anything for it yet, but it might change in a couple months or something. But so on the entry level, the Mavic Mini, what's interesting about the Mavic Mini is that it's 249 grams, which is just below what the FAA can regulate. So it doesn't mean you can fly near airports with it. It just means that you don't have to register it. Any other drone that you buy, you're gonna have to register it online with the FAA. I think it costs like $5, and then you have to write the little serial number on your drone. It's just in case you crash your drone somewhere and you run away and they they try to identify whose drone it is. It's just one of the things you just can't get around, except if you have the Mavic Mini, which was interesting about why they released it. And then here are some of the specs. All right, so that's the Mavic Mini. All these smaller drones have a 1/2-inch sensor, 12 megapixels. It's enough to do stuff for social media. It's definitely, you can take some great shots with it. Some of these models don't have raw photo capability like the Mavic Mini. It only has JPEGs. And another smaller one than the Mavic Mini, which is about 2 or 3 years old now, is the Spark. It also was only JPEG. And then we have the two Mavic Airs here. The Mavic Air 2 is the one that was just released. I have the Mavic Air as kind of my backup drone right now. And these prices are current as of maybe like a month ago. So I don't think anything has changed, but great starter drones are probably, I would lean towards the Mavic Air 2. If you can afford it. The Mavic Mini, if you don't want to invest that much money into it and you're not comfortable flying, it's just that the fact that it doesn't shoot RAW is a big downside for me if I was getting into it. And surprisingly, these two have very long flight times, 34 minutes for the Mavic Air 2 and 30 minutes for the Mavic Mini. The Mavic Air 1, I have it on here just because I have this thing where I don't buy the newest piece of gear that comes out. As soon as the new one comes out, I buy a used version of the model right previous to that, because everybody's selling whatever they have to buy the new thing. So the Mavic Air, you can buy them used or refurbished from reputable websites for about 400, the same price as the Mavic Mini, and you get the raw and shorter flight time, but you can shoot 4K if you do video. So there are some benefits to that. So these are three great options for super entry level, low budget drones. Next, we have the mid level, which we have a few options. So I forgot to write Mavic on here. Okay, so these are the two Mavics. The Mavics, well, there's a Mavic 1, which came out 2 years ago now, which I kind of would stay away from because it was the first line of the Mavic. It's got a short flight time. It can shoot RAW and stuff, but the gimbal wasn't as good. And it's the photo resolution, I mean, it had a good size sensor. I think actually it was only 1/2-inch sensor, but it was the older 1/2-inch sensor. So the resolution wasn't as good. So I wouldn't really go for that one. I'd go for those three that I mentioned earlier. Or if you were going for the mid-level, I would get one of these two right here. This is the Mavic 2 Pro, and this is the Mavic 2 Zoom. The body themselves are identical. What's different is the camera. So if you are shooting a lot of low light, you need the dynamic range, you're shooting low light situations, the Mavic 2 Pro is probably what you should go for. It's got the 1-inch sensor, which is the same size sensor as the Phantom 4. It's got a 31-minute flight time. It is a little bit more expensive than the Zoom, and it does 4K 10 bits. I don't know if, how much you guys know about video, but 10-bit video just allows for more color grading in post. The Zoom is, I've actually had both of these. I had the Mavic 2 Pro and I hit a kite surfer and I lost it in the ocean. And well, I hit the kite surfer's kite, not the kite surfer. And so then after that, with my insurance, which you should get drone insurance, um, I got the Mavic 2 Zoom, which is a little cheaper. And what's interesting actually with the drones overall is due to the tariffs on China, the drones were actually cheaper before. I believe the Mavic 2 Pro was 1,400 when it first came out, and the 2 Zoom was 1,200. And now they raised the price of the 2 Pro to 1,600 and 1,349 for the Zoom. It just, it is what it is. It's economics and politics and stuff. But the Zoom, what I like about the Zoom is that, as the name suggests, it has a zoom lens. It's I believe a 24 to 48. Yeah, I have written right here, 24 to 48 millimeter lens. And I like it mostly for that zoom capability as far as video, because you could do the lens compression kind of shots, revealing shots coming from behind an object. And also if you want to shoot action sports, water sports, I could shoot said kite surfer from a distance, but zoomed in and not hit the kite and not lose the drone. So that's kind of why the zoom is good. It doesn't have the same size sensor as a 1/2-inch sensor, so you won't get the dynamic range of the 2 Pro, but it does have this mode where it can stitch photos together and make a 48 megapixel image out of the 12 megapixel. You just have to put it in that mode and it'll hold position and take all these photos, and it'll do that. What's also interesting is that you can actually send it in, or you can do it yourself. You can change the camera. So you can buy whichever one of these is, whichever one of these you choose. And if you decide you want the bigger sensor or you want the zoom capability, you can buy the camera separately, have it installed, or install it yourself. And then you'll have both, the best of both worlds, I guess. That's an option. And then the Phantom 4 Pro, which they're going to start discontinuing it soon, because they were supposed to release a Phantom 5, but there were rumors that they were going to do it and then they weren't going to do it. But they just released a Phantom 4. So there's a few versions of it. The newest one is the Phantom 4 Pro V2, which I believe they just added some sensors to it. I don't think they changed anything about the camera itself. So, and speaking of sensors, a lot of these drones have obstacle avoidance sensors. So if you are flying and you're about to hit something, not like a pole, a skinny pole, it probably wouldn't identify a pole, but a wall, some large object, it'll actually stop and it'll beep, or it'll beep as it's getting close and then it'll stop. I personally don't use the obstacle avoidance features just because I've been flying so long and I'm kind of comfortable with it. And also if I'm shooting boats and stuff, I don't want it to stop when I'm chasing a boat, because then the boat will just crash into the drone. So that's something to keep in mind, which is what makes these drones so easy to fly, because apart from the fact that they'll hold their position, they'll stop before hitting an obstacle. Nothing like a skinny pole or maybe a tree with not many leaves on it. So I wouldn't push the limits of the obstacle avoidance, but they do a pretty good job of avoiding things, and they'll let you know, they'll beep before you hit something. The Phantom Pro has a 1-inch sensor. I don't think it's the same sensor as the Mavic 2 Pro, but it is a 1-inch sensor with better dynamic range. It's 20 megapixels also, 30-minute flight time, raw 4K. It doesn't have, I don't believe it has the 10-bit the Mavic 2 Pro has, but I use it a lot, especially for the boat stuff, because it's easier to grab. You can imagine grabbing a tiny little Mavic body in the wind, on a boat bobbing up and down and in the wind, it'd be quite difficult to do it without cutting yourself. But something I want to cover real quick is the Mavic Air 2. It had, well, actually, no, that's more video related. I'm not going to cover it, but this does 4K 60, and the Mavic Air 2 does 4K 60, which is interesting because none of these Mavics do 4K 60. But anyways, moving on. Pro level, I didn't even put any information here because most likely anybody watching here would not be interested in pro level drones, but these are like cinema level drones. This one on the left here, you can change the camera out and change the lenses. It's got a longer flight time. You can put 2 batteries on it. Super heavy, super expensive. The drone itself is only about $2,500. The camera is like $5,000. Just crazy prices. And if you lose, the basic rule is don't put anything in the air that you can't afford to lose. So it really depends on your lifestyle and your budget. But this one on the right, the DJI Matrix 600, you can put cinema level cameras, red cameras, RE, Alexas, all these crazy things. And you have to sort of build it out yourself. You can buy the gimbal separately, and then the flight time differs, what batteries you put on there, but that's getting into the super high end kind of stuff. I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick.
Sure. On the do you know just off the top of your head what the focal range is on some of those other drones that you didn't have listed?
Oh yeah, everything is about 24.
Okay. Okay. Good.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Everything's about 24, which is not the super wide from the old days where we have to put a GoPro on there, but it's a decent one. And then the Mavic 2 Pro has, it's hard to explain, but it uses a smaller part of the sensor and adds a sort of zoom feature, but it's not really an optical zoom.
Okay.
And no more questions? Is that?
There are, but I'm going to hold it. I want you. I don't
Okay.
want you to run out of time. So.
Okay. Yeah. How much should I speed up, slow down? I know it's a lot to cover.
Let's get to the good stuff.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to get into composition. A lot of the regular rules of photography apply to drone photography. You know, rule of thirds, leading lines, focal point, balance, repetition. The type of photos you can get. You know, abstract, top downs, minimalist. When you put the drone in the air, you start to notice patterns and things and architecture and stuff that you wouldn't normally notice from the ground level. Unobtainable POV is just, you know, if you're shooting over water towards something where you wouldn't be able to go with a regular camera, over the edge of a cliff, super high altitude, below the 400 feet, of course. I'm going to go into some examples. Here we have two examples of leading lines. And as I mentioned, these are photos that I showed before, but I didn't really go into that much. The bridge here is the leading line to the focal point, this mountain over here. And the river here is the leading line to the waterfall. So, you know, you kind of, when you visit a location, you should sort of have an idea of what you're trying to get before you put the drone in the air, because you're limited by your flight time. And then, you know, buy a bunch of batteries so that you don't feel rushed, and so that you can put the drone up and kind of, you know, look at your situation, see how the light is hitting things, see just if you can pick out different different compositional elements within your 30-minute or 25-minute flight time, whatever it is. Repetition is something you'll notice. Here we have all these boats that are kind of like balancing out the image. Here we have these cliffs. This is on the Oregon coast, that are all kind of triangularly shaped, and we have that repetition kind of thing going. Focal point, you know, as I mentioned, I kind of covered this actually. I should have gone lighter on the coverage of the photos earlier, but so, you know, you put yourself in the photo and you become the focal point, and you also add scale to the image, which otherwise, if you would have just covered the person here, it's a nice looking landscape, but you really don't know what you're looking at. Am I close to something? How big are these cliffs and these mountains? And it adds, you know, interest and perspective to photos. Rule of thirds, of course, applies to photography. This one on the left is a little bit more of an abstract, but we have most of the weight here. And this snow is kind of a leading line that leads to the sun over here. And then here we have the very crazy colored cruise ship, and it's sort of on the 2/3 side over here, pointing this way. I wouldn't say there's much of a focal point here, but it's kind of evenly weighted with the rule of thirds. These are the top-down abstracts that I was talking about, you know, noticing patterns. This kind of reminds me of like, you know, a playing card or something. And then with coastlines, what's interesting is you can put the drone up and just keep taking multiple photos at, you know, have all your settings set up, but just keep taking multiple photos at the same settings. And the way the waves break, you'll notice, you know, interesting lines, and that's just completely random. That's, you know, part of nature. But, you know, here, I think what caught my eye was just this wave here and this wave here, kind of, you know, it's a little repetition, and then just the blue and the green, you know, it's just interesting composition. And yeah, top downs are really popular, just because it's a perspective that you wouldn't otherwise ever see from the ground. And then these are examples of some perspectives that you would normally get. You know, not everybody, but a lot of people have seen the Seljalandsfoss waterfall here in Iceland. Usually you would shoot it from down. Do they see my cursor, by the way, the mouse?
See, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So usually you would shoot it from down here. There's a popular shot where you shoot from behind the waterfall out this way. There's something to keep in mind, that some of these famous waterfalls in Iceland are kind of no-fly zones for the drone. I'm not fully sure. I know the really famous one, Skogafoss, the one that's right off the road there. That's definitely a no-fly zone, but you'll see people flying drones there. This one, I think it's a little, it's a little iffy. I didn't see any signs. A little research that I didn't really tell me whether it was drones allowed or not. So I think I just took off from the parking lot just in case. It's one of those things where you kind of have to do as much research as you can, but if you can't find anything, I mean, it's not really going to hurt anybody if you pop the drone up and get a shot, but you don't want to be like a bad influence. And then, if somebody sees your cool shot, everybody wants to kind of do the same thing. So kind of be responsible with that. This is the bridge that I mentioned earlier. This is shot over the ocean. I actually cropped the ocean out of the shot just because I wanted the blue and the golden hour light here. And then we can have a little repetition here with the shadow and the bridge right there. Oh, and that's the end.
That's the end? I was like, I want more.
Well, I could talk more, but that's the end of my examples.
Okay. So you're asking me, are there questions? And there are questions. Are you ready for them?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Let's see. Well, let's see. I did a pretty good job. There were just a couple of questions.
Should I stop sharing screen?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Then maybe I can actually see. Oh my God, there's a lot of questions.
Well, I've been collecting them. Okay, so I think you answered the name. You said it early on, but there were some new drones that you were talking about that were all manual. Can you just throw the name of that? Say that name again. So
it's hard to say because a lot of those you build yourself. There are what they called RTF ready to fly or BNF bind and fly, which you bind to your remote. But a lot of those are very DIY. This model that I have was a bind and fly model, which they do recommend if you are just getting into it, not to build your first drone because they do this thing. You have to do this thing called tuning where you adjust the strength of the motors. And it's better for beginners to start out flying a tuned aircraft rather than mess around and crash and try again and change this and crash. So yeah, that's a whole different world.
Okay. Ben wants to know, do you find that the sensors on the drones have enough dynamic range so as not to blow out the sky? Or are you bracketing?
So the drones do have bracketing features. They have the built-in HDR feature. They have bracketing features. They have time-lapse mode. They have burst mode. Like they're really like on the software side, the drones are like super advanced and they have these built-in fly modes where you can create a flight path, or it'll fly in orbit around something, or it has a cinematic mode where it'll fly slower. So there are a lot of pre-programmed flight modes in the drones, which I personally don't use because I don't like to hand off control of the to the drone to the software because I don't trust it, and I trust myself better. But yeah, there are a lot of features and software you have to just dig around and mess with them.
Okay. So Angie asked, and you've been flying for a while, but be honest, are these really hard to fly? I mean, how, can someone pick it up and get it up in the air pretty quick, or are we going to be anxious ridden that we're going to crash?
It depends how ambitious you are and what kind of shots are you getting. Like if you buy a drone and you don't, the first thing you do is not updating the firmware and making sure everything's good. And you just take it to like some crazy location, fly it over the water, or you fly it, under very windy conditions, I think anybody would have a hard time. But to be honest, like the fact that the drone can just hover there and not do anything, and if you don't touch the controller, it'll stay in its position. I mean, you can't argue with the fact that it is easy to fly, which is part of the problem because too many people are buying drones and then like, oh, it'll just stay there, and then they'll get comfortable and then they'll try to do something crazy, or they'll turn around facing the opposite way, and then left becomes right and right becomes left. And that's where people get confused and crash into trees and stuff.
Okay. So I know that you went through in your presentation the different levels of drones and you did a comparison to them. But we have a few beginners. And what we're really interested in is the beginner drone. So of the choices and the packages, et cetera, they're overwhelming. Do you have any tips on choosing one? If you
Well, it really depends, like I said, on your budget. You know,
Mhm.
I would, if you're very hesitant, I would start with the cheapest one, the Mavic Mini. Well, actually, I'm not showing the screen anymore, but the Mavic Mini, 300, 399, $400, it'll get you in the game. And, you know, if you're really hesitant, start with the cheapest drone that you can afford, and just be cautious and fly cautiously.
Okay. So Peter Crass has asked the question that I had in my mind. And the question is, how is the situation in traveling to different countries? Do you put it in your carry-on? Are there customs declarations? Have you had any problems with getting it?
So for that, you also have to do a lot of research, because some countries, they'll categorize it as a camera, and so they'll say you can only bring in 2 cameras. And so if you bring in, you know 2 regular cameras and the drone, you'll have to pay some kind of taxes on it.
Oh,
um, Maybe because they think you're going to sell it. I think, let's see, I don't think I've had any trouble. And it's kind of lucky, because I travel with about 5 cameras, 2 drones, a few GoPros, and then all the tripods and chargers and batteries and stuff like that. So I travel pretty heavy, and I haven't really been bothered too much. So, I wouldn't say it's that big of an issue. Just, do the research as far as flying in these places, because sometimes all you have to do is, I think in Canada or some places, all you have to do is register for the dates that you're going to be there, and just so they have a record that somebody with a drone is going to be there at that time. It really differs from country to country.
okay. Okay, give me a second to run through this list because
Oh yeah, Tumalo Falls. Yeah, I see it in the comment. Yeah, it's Tumalo Falls, that waterfall that I couldn't remember the name.
yeah, let me run through this list real quick because you
And
produced.
Tumalo Falls is actually what I loved about Oregon is that it, like, so Pacific Northwest is one of the most epic places that I've been to. Like, for such a small geographic location, the amount of locations that there are to shoot, and the Oregon coast and a lot of the Oregon locations were very drone friendly. A lot of the waterfalls, I looked it up. They're not in national parks, and that's why I was able to get a lot of drone stuff out there, like flying down Samuel L. Borden Scenic Corridor, epic location for drone flying. You got to be careful with the seagulls, because I was flying out there, and the seagull kept, every time I got close to like bringing the drone back, it would just come. And that's actually another thing I should add: be careful with birds when you're flying with drones, because don't worry about hitting a bird. The bird will come and attack your drone, and all I have to do is touch the propeller. The bird might get away unharmed, maybe, but your drone will definitely go down. So if you're over water or something, just be careful with that. Hawks, seagulls, crows.
Oh, I would have never, I would have never considered that. I'm always
Yeah,
looking for trees because that seems to be my thing. They
yeah. Well,
jump
trees
out
don't
in front
attack you.
of, they
Seagulls
do. They
will.
jump out in front of my drone.
Oh, well, for some
Okay.
people.
So, all right. I'm not seeing any other questions. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up your presentation?
No, just drones are a tool in your photography toolkit. So it's not like, you should only become a drone photographer. Maybe, 2 or 3 years ago, people were starting drone only photography companies or video production companies, and just being exclusively aerial photographers. Now it's too commonplace. So it should be just another tool in your toolkit. And just, like, you show up at a location, and it's okay to fly drones. You get some regular photos, and then pop the drone up and see what else you can get perspective wise, and just another level of creativity.
Okay. Well, Chris, thank you for doing this. It took a little bit of time. I know that this is something that you do. You put out videos and tutorials, but you did this for my group, and I really appreciate it. So,
Yeah, no problem.
guys,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to say this. I'm going to twist your arm and have you come back because
Sure.
there are quite a few topics that I know that you can cover for us. So, guys, you can find Chris at Boss Talk Productions, and his website is bosstalkpro.com.
Hmm.
And while you're there, check out his travel guides. He's got a lot of free photography tutorials, and look at his many documentaries and his film portfolio.
A lot of
And if you're on Instagram, be sure to give him a follow at Boss Talk Pro. Next week, videographer and photographer Rob Hoovis will be here to present In a Flash, lightning photography, and dark sky time lapse. So until next Wednesday, go out and create something beautiful, and I hope that we see you next week.